Let's play that again. Let me see. Pull that up. Hit that. That. Let's hit it again. Okay. Everyone can see my screen again?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Change when the sun goes down. Check yourself. As the sun begins to descend in the western sky, see, the energy from the sun is being taken from you and you start getting somewhat drowsy. So Eve here means that when God walks away, he takes the light with him, but he left light in you. But when your evening comes, meaning the light is diminishing, the strength of truth is diminishing in your mind, then another thought comes up in your mind against the light. And because it's evening, or it is eve, or the time of the weakening of truth in your own being, you yield to the other voice. So in the Quran, it says, I seek refuge in the Lord of men, the King of men, the God of men, from the evil whispering of a slinking devil that whispers into the hearts of men from among the jinn and the men. So most of your and my mess don't come from somebody outside ourselves. And even if it does, the person outside of you makes a suggestion to you. And even if you know it is wrong, somehow if you want to do it, you start playing with your mind to justify what you're about to do.
All right. Thoughts, comments, cognitions? Go ahead, Sister Peggy.
Evening time is when we're about to eat, or is that meal time?
Mm-hmm.
So that's when, if you really want to make excuses, that's a great time in the evening.
Oh, yes,
That
ma'am.
happens when you're about to eat and you make all kind of excuses for what or when you're going to eat, maybe a little early, or maybe you're going to eat something that really isn't that good, but it happens around eating dinner time.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. That's right in line with where we're going tonight. Go ahead, Sister Belinda.
It's my understanding that that's why the intervals between the prayers shorten as you get into the evening time also.
Mm. Yes, ma'am. It makes sense. It makes
Mhm.
sense. Sister Angela.
Yes, sir. Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
Walaikum salam.
And happy Savior's Day.
Happy Savior's Day.
I listened to the first part of what the minister said when the evening starts and we start getting drowsy, and we know in the tech that that's the time of not an unconscious state. We're not as alert as we normally are. So I would call them the skeletons in the closet start rattling, and we can become keyed in and re-stimulated and aberrated.
Now, what does that have to do with the drowsiness? Can you elaborate on that, Sister Angela?
Well, it's the unconscious state. Usually when we receive an engram, we're in a state of unconsciousness, because the pain turns off the analytical mind and the reactionary mind takes over. So when we find ourselves drowsy, is usually most of the time when we are brought back to that time subconsciously. We're not even conscious that our mind is going there, but this is a form of protection that this engram is trying to, warn that there's danger, because the danger happened before in, in a similar environment. So I know for me, I took notice. Before I didn't notice it until I took the course, especially the seminar with the fish. When the fish almost got eaten, he was in that similar environment, he was gone. So I started noticing my anxiety kicked in most times at night when I was tired.
Mhm. So you're saying that just being fatigued is a trigger that can open up Pandora's box within
Oh,
ourselves.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
thank you. Sister Sultana.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. When I listened to the minister, the first thing that came to my mind was the chemical reaction that happens in the body during sunset, when the sun sets, as the serotonin production slows and the melatonin production starts to increase due to the lack of light,
Mhm.
and how that plays on the psychological and emotional state as well.
Yes, ma'am. Definitely. So there's a biochemical connection as well. Thank you for that, Sister Sultana.
Alhamdulillah.
Anyone else before we move forward? Go ahead,
Can
Sister.
may I
Mhm.
just add this
Mhm.
too? For those of, and I notice mine more because I'm a night hawk at that. I can easily sit up for days, and I put that to good use working with working on the Closing the Gap book and working with Brother Jabril, man, I'll be pleased with him. I put that to good use and forcing myself to stay up, getting even more, slipping into that unconscious state more. And I'm telling you, it was like walking through the house of horror. For me, that was, I don't know how many triggers and key-ins and aberrations that I've awakened or allowed to happen by doing that, staying up for days at a time. So I just wanted to add that.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Sister Naima.
Yes, sir. Assalamu alaikum, family.
Waalaikumsalam.
So what came to mind for me is, of course, the original question of what time do it seem like that you are having your hardest time just dealing with, your engrams coming out. And I think for me is this at night. And listening to the minister, what came to mind for me is that he represents the sun, the light of truth, the light of Allah to the people and to the world. And as it's getting closer and closer for the minister's, departure, as he told us that he will be ascending to the Father, it's like the more the auditing and the tool of Dianetics is coming and impressing upon my mind the need for it as we're looking at the sun in the evening, the sun going down, the sun of the light of the Honorable Mr. Louis Farrakhan, not that it's dimming as far as the truth that he brings, but just with him, going to ascending to the Father as he has taught us.
So are you saying that there's a possibility his departure would be like the sun setting and his absence would be like the night, which would increase the potential for aberrated thoughts? Sister Naima?
I'm sorry, Brother Lukman, can you repeat that because you kind of went out?
Okay. Yes, ma'am. I said, so would you say that the minister's absence that we're told those 3 years, approximately 3 years, his absence would be like the sun setting, and the time period while he's gone would be like a nightfall, and that would place us in an environment where our aberrations would come to the surface?
Yes, sir. The way you said it, yes, sir. Praise be to Allah. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Sister Patricia.
Yes, sir. Couple things. In some dementia patients, they call them sundown.
Mhm.
And we talk about the darkness. Now, darkness can appear no matter if it's the time of day or not. It's the time of that moment. When you're like, if you're overwhelmed, it could be in the afternoon, it could be in the evening, it could be night. But if you're overwhelmed throughout that time, then your thoughts come in. You get aggravated. It's like all this comes at once, and then you're kind of snappy. So when you're affected by the darkness, if you don't have that clear mind, then yeah, it can affect you. You won't be productive. And that made me think about, I don't know if we can go back from last week. I wanted to ask a question about what we went over, and it was talking about the force, and it was saying about um, if the force is about the dynamics when we were doing the 8 dynamics, and you asked us a question, which one you think would have been the most important one, and you said the 6, the MEST,
Mhm.
which is matter, energy, space, and time. And I was wondering about if it says if this is dynamics is that deals with force, and force is where we are deficient. How are we deficient in force?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a good question. Well, one thing that L. Ron Hubbard said was, and I'm just going to paraphrase it, but at the root of our aberrated mind is our inability to control our own thoughts. So in other words, when we look at it from the perspective of the tech, call them demon circuits. When you look at it from the perspective of Islam, we have what's called the whispering devil. And when you look at it from the perspective of Christianity or the Bible, it talks about devil, or a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. And it also refers to the law. There's a law in my mind that is at war with the law in my body. So when you look at the fact that there's an internal mechanism that is applying force to us and is at the root of us engaging in aberrated behavior, which are our compulsions, our addictions, our habits, whatever it is that we're wrestling with to move up the ladder to get towards righteous conduct and behavior. There's something that's within us that we're at war with. That represents a force. Now, we have to work on applying a counter force that is equal to or greater than the force that's on the inside. And if we can generate a force that's equal to or opposite than the force on the inside, then we can overcome our compulsions, or as we say, the coins, our compulsions, our obsessions, our insanities, our neuroses, and our psychoses. So everything with aberration is based on force. And force is the one thing that it seems like we don't have, because we do what? We lack a knowledge of self, of who we really are. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Because think about it, every time we begin to go down the road of doing something, the way the reactive mind works, it doesn't, sometimes we do hear that with that circuit, we have that whispering, but I know for me, oftentimes it comes as a picture that comes in the form of something that's desired. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So me, I deal with sweets. So what does my picture look like? My picture comes in the form of ice cream and chocolate, because that's what my reactive mind uses to take me down the road. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
For some of us, our pictures are different.
Right.
And I was thinking about this the other day in Closing the Gap on page 19. It talks about how the Savior used to teach the believers at that time period using pictures, because it says the picture doesn't represent the truth, but there's truth in the picture.
Yes.
And the more you look into the picture, the more truth you can extract, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Well, guess what? I was thinking about it. By Allah's grace, the reactive mind lies in the straight path, and he uses pictures too. So the reactive mind gives us a picture of something, and the more we contemplate on that picture, the more truth we extract from that picture with regards to the fact that I have to have it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So it's almost like the reactive mind is lying in wait
You're
and
straight
using the
line.
very nature in which the mind operates off of pictures, but it uses pictures to take us off in the wrong direction. Okay, so that's why L. Ron Hubbard, that was one of the reasons why L. Ron Hubbard was saying the sixth dynamic is important, because that's where the root of our aberration exists, our inability to produce force to overcome our environment. Our environment is cause and we are effect. So we drive home, we watch TV, advertisements and commercials. Next thing you know, we're leaving the house at 11:30 at night to go get a Sonic burger and a milkshake or something. Just using that as an example. But the bottom line is, when those impulses come, we got to have a counter force to say, I'm not going through the drive-through tonight. I'm not going to do X, Y, and Z. Okay, so sixth dynamic is the force dynamic.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Sister Charlotte.
Yes, sir. What came to mind after listening to the minister made me think of, because I'm in the medical field, for some reason, it immediately brought to mind the term sundowning, which is a neurological disorder associated with people, most commonly with Alzheimer's. And the symptoms that they experience in the late evening, more behavioral disturbances and confusion and agitation. So that's what came to my mind after listening to the minister's words. And for me, my issues start right after I wake up in the morning. That's why I have to stay prayerful all the time, because my mind is extremely busy. 8 o'clock in the morning, I'm thinking about what I'm going to have for dinner at 4 o'clock, and it's 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. And if you give me the opportunity, sometimes that reactive mind is, it's gone right after I wake up. So it just brings to mind that for me personally, I have to constantly be on my prayer rug.
Yes, ma'am. Ain't that the truth? Thank you. Sister Angela.
I'm gonna strive to tie these two things together and try to hurry up so we can move in to where you're striving to go. I'm thankful the sister brought up the question about matter, energy, space, and time, and marry it to this evening. I had a conversation in MGT class dealing with us, meaning MGT, FOY, those in the Nation of Islam. And she had a very beautiful outlook on our striving. And when I add that to number 6, I have to deal with the space and time, because I think the matter and the energy that we're moving against a force of this world. And the fact that we can make a prayer, we can eat at 4 o'clock, we can do a lot of things. Some of these things we have in motion. I believe our biggest task is with force is will. One of the reasons we were given this tool of Dianetics, so we can extract the fullness of our teachings, because we seem to have gotten to a certain point and was not able to go any further. So I'm seeing this messed, or the space and time in particular, is I know some of us are constricted with time, this is what causes our aberrations or the reactive mind to kick in at a certain time. And some of us don't use space or time very well. So it's about closing up this space and using time that we are pulling into existence the things that we desire and what we're willing. So that's where I see the problem in.
Yes, ma'am. Definitely. Thank you. Sister Denise.
Yes, sir. I used to wonder why my teacher, when I was in the 8th grade, why she every day from the time school starts from September to June, every day, 100 math problems. And I just knew her finger would break when she got to 100. But even if she had to put it in the corner, I mean, all around the room was just 100 math problems. Soon as you walked into the classroom, every day. And I couldn't understand her, you know, with all the math problems. She said, you need to wake up. And I was like, I'm awoke, you know, my eyes is open. She said, no, you're not woke yet. Start doing those math problems. I mean, early in the morning, as soon as we get that. And I thought about attention span and how we say that the children attention span is not, you know, but 10 minutes and that's it. That's all you're going to get. And then you have to do something else with them or something like that. So I was thinking while I was listening to the minister talk about the eve being the evening time, and when the sun rises, you get as much time. I guess number 6, space and time. You have the full day. And when I went to Phoenix, Arizona, it was like a full day. Like the sun is up, and you get the whole entire day, and you're not saving daylight. They say daylight saving time, but you're not saving time during the daylight. You know, because they trying to hold on to the sun as long as they can. You know, at like, I don't want you to go anywhere. So they changes it to get as much of it as they can. And Phoenix was the only city that I was in that you got the sun from the sun up to the darkness came, like you got more of the sun. And that's what I was thinking in terms of because when the sun is out, I don't know, we just want to stay in it forever. But when it goes down or it starts going down, that's when all kind of stuff happens. You know, you lose focus. It's nighttime. You can't do what you do in the day. All that kind of stuff. That's what I was thinking about.
Interesting thought. Thank you.
Yes,
Sister,
sir.
Sister Charlotte.
Yes, sir. Sister Angela's comment made me recall something I've read in one of L. Ron Hubbard's books. He stated that the minute that you agree that God exists, it becomes necessary to invent the devil. He said, thought is a kind of energy, but it can do things that mess can't. And he said, thought doesn't necessarily occupy the same universe as mess. So it just that just came to mind.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Quick second. I want to go back and touch on something that Sister, who just spoke about that, about the mathematical problems. That was Sister Denise. The 100
Yes.
math problems.
Yes, sir. Early in the morning. Yes, sir.
The thought that came to my mind when you talked about that was, in the way in which she phrased it, it was as if doing those math problems and doing math in general, because you have to be in present time to do math. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So when she said, you know, about being awake and you got 100 math problems, it's almost like the math is being used to bring you into present. Not that that was the intention. I'm just using the language of the text in modern context of doing the math to put you in present time. And when a child's mind wanders, or even when our mind wanders, because if I was to give 10 math problems right now, how many of us, our mind would start wandering? Okay, but now, if we're doing math problems in present time, and our mind starts to wander, is it going to wander into the future, or is it going to wander into the past? Because it's not going to be present time, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So it's almost like mathematics in general has a way of re-stimulating us. But if we can get through the re-stimulation of mathematics, physics, and science, if we can get through that and start working on it, what happens? You have to be in present time to work the math, correct?
Absolutely.
So that was just a thought that came to mind when Sister Denise had said that. Go ahead, Sister Anya.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
I thought about as nighttime approaches, there's a gradual changeover and a dimming of the light of day, which took me to our recent loss of Brother Jabril, the loss of Sister Ava, Mother Taineba. And it's like a dimming of the lights gradually, leading up to, so taking us further and further into the darkness of night, a long night without the light. And the minister talked about that, about without the light, leading up to the departure of the minister himself. And two other thoughts came to mind was when the angel, I saw a man late in the evening carrying a heavy load, climbing up the mountain. And also in our general orders to be especially watchful at night. And then it says during the times of meetings. So when nighttime comes, you no longer have the light of day, wherein you can easily see what's going on, what's approaching you. It's easy to carry out your tasks when the light is present. But when night times comes, now, when you talked about that counter force, there are many forces in that darkness that you don't readily see. You have to be able to see with a different kind of sight, a different kind of light to see what's in the darkness. And if you don't have that kind of light, then there's forces there that can easily come upon you and attack you without you being aware of it. So we have to rely on a different kind of light. That's what I'm getting to. A different kind of light. And we have to prepare ourselves ahead of time and set up that kind of light, because once the light of day is gone, then you're either going to have to, be able to put some oil in your lamp and put a lamp on to have light, or make sure that you've paid your electric bill so that you can switch on the light. Or some other means, and I'm likening that to our study. If we have not studied, then during this dark period that we're about to go through, we're not going to have oil in our lamps. We're not going to have the information that we need in ourselves, and be a light ourselves to carry us through that darkness and be beacons of light for others. So I could go on a little bit more, but I'll leave it right there.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you. That reminds me of the one story was given in two different formats. When you deal with the handmaidens in the Bible, And I'm going to just paraphrase the story, but it talks about that there were certain handmaids that kept their lamps burning all the time, and there were some that did not. And when those that didn't keep their lamps burning were asked, like, why don't you keep your lamps burning? They said, well, when the husband comes, we'll get the oil, we'll light our lamps then. Or I think it might have also said that we'll borrow from your light or something like that. And no, that's actually from the Quranic standpoint. But there were some that didn't keep their lamps burning. And then it said that when they saw the husband coming, they went to light the lamps, but they didn't have the oil. So they had to run around and try to get the oil. But those that kept their lamps burning 24/7, when the husbandman came, he took those that kept their lamps burning, and those that didn't have the lamps burning didn't go. Same story from a kind of a different perspective. It's in Surah, let's see, I think it's Surah 57. Surah 57, ayat number 13. It's kind of the same context. It says, there's one group of people that will say, wait for us that we may borrow from your light. It will be said, turn back and seek a light. Then a wall with a door in it will be raised between them. Within it shall be mercy, and outside of it chastisement. And as everyone is speaking, I'm looking at, I just found out probably about maybe 2 or 3 hours ago about Brother Jabril, may Allah be pleased with him. And then when you look at Mother Tanetta, and you look at all those great lights that Allah blessed us with, that have guided us and blessed us with the heavy wisdom that has ignited everyone in this Zoom meeting on varying levels. And now it's almost as if we're coming to a time period where we have to learn how to be able to go within ourselves and find that light that is within us. If you look at Surah 24, ayat number 35, it talks about a light in which is a lamp. It's neither eastern nor western, though fire touch it not. And it's talking about the light of Allah. And I look at it from the standpoint, it's talking about the light of Allah that's in each individual. We're in a time period where we have to be able to tap into that God within ourselves, because we're going to be in situations where we may not be in contact with one another. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And that's kind of right in sync with where we're going tonight.
One other quick point is that when nighttime comes, and again having to keep your guard up because of those forces that come during the night. Most of our people, we are faced with what was referred to as primetime TV.
Mm-hmm.
And all of the evil suggestion that comes through the different programming. And that's when our guard is down, and we're most susceptible to the evil suggestion and less able to ward off the effects of that, or even to turn away from it and not put it on at all.
So are you saying that in the evening, when we're already tired,
Yes, sir.
and our tone is we're at that point where we can be re-stimulated, or the circuits can be implanted. So we work hard all day, we come home, now we're already tired.
Yes,
and
sir.
now the evil suggestions are coming through the TV.
Yes, sir.
That could be why they're called programs, correct?
Yes, sir.
Oh, praise be to Allah.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I don't have cable TV. But that makes perfect sense. It's by design.
It does. Yes, it is.
Sister Denise.
Yes, sir. Real quick.
Mhm.
I when she would do the math, 100 problems every day,
Mhm.
when you go home, it's like you have to readjust your evening time, because you know what you're gonna face the next day. You're gonna see those problems like they were not gonna disappear. I was hoping she would get sick or something, but it never happened. They were always there. And I thought about in our general orders about walking our posts in a perfect manner. keeping always on the alert,
Mhm.
and knowing that she was gonna have those 100 math problems. It's like if you had to go to bed at 7 o'clock, okay, because you know those problems are gonna be there, and then you had a certain length of time to do it. So you had to make sure you had enough rest, in the evening time. You had to readjust your schedule, all of that, and then you have to get up like alert. And so I thought about the general orders about, you walking and people see you moving, but you always on the alert for whatever and whenever, because you never know what's gonna come at you.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
that's what yes, sir.
That's kind of like what we're going to be facing in a few short days as well, because we don't know what's in store with regards to how we're going to be tested. So there's an old saying in the martial arts. It says it's best to sweat abundantly in time of practice than to bleed abundantly in a time of war. So we have to make sure we're on our practice with the tech, our religion, our Islam, the teachings, all those things. So when we're in that situation, we have something to keep our minds in focus and keep us rooted for the time period that the minister is going to be gone. Let's see, we got in the comments. Okay, so let us go ahead and begin with, let me pull up the PowerPoint. Let's get into it. Okay, come on screen. Okay. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we're going to be dealing with compulsion. There's no compulsion in religion. And this is based on the ayat from the Holy Quran that says, in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, there is no compulsion in religion. The right way is indeed clearly distinct from error. So whoever disbelieves in the devil and believes in Allah, he indeed lays hold on the firmest handle, which shall never break. And Allah is hearing and knowing. And that is Surah 2, ayat 256. Quick overview. We're going to look at the concept of compulsion. Why is compulsion not found in religion? Okay, why is it that there's no compulsion in religion? And what is the relationship between compulsion and responsibility? What are overts? What are withholds and motivators? And what is one of the methods we can use to remove overts, withholds, and motivators? So what we're going to do is we're going to marry Surah 2, ayat 256. We're going to marry this with the tech of Dianetics. And we're specifically going to be dealing with the book. It is called Introduction to Scientology Ethics. Has anyone ever seen that book before? Yes, no?
No.
Okay.
Yes, sir. I have that book.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
All right.
And
So
intro to what?
Say what?
Intro to
Introduction to Scientology Ethics.
Oh, ethics. Okay.
Ethics, yes. So let us begin. There's no compulsion in religion. So let's break down the Arabic, and then we're going to marry the Arabic to the text. The word compulsion comes from the root word kariha. Kariha. It means to force, to compel, or to coerce. It also means antipathy, dislike, reluctant, grudgingly, under compulsion, or under duress. So this is one of the ways, from one perspective, this is one of the ways that the reactive mind operates. The reactive mind does what? It whispers, but it's applying a force because the reactive mind, and then further down in the text, he called the reactive mind the genetic entity. And when you summarize all these concepts, what L. Ron Hubbard stated was that the reactive mind, genetic entity, represents our physical body. Does that make sense? Yes, no? I can't see anyone, so I gotta go.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So our physical body is what we're fighting our jihad against. This is the war.
Mm-hmm.
So the theta, you have theta and you have mest. You have the life force and you have the physical body. And there is intelligence in the life force, which is the self. And then there's a force that exists in the physical body. Does that make sense? This is the war.
Yes, sir.
Okay. In the text, it defines compulsion as an engrammate command that the organism must do something. Things the PC feels, what PC is preclear, things that the preclear feels compelled to do. So everyone here has some type of compulsions, obsessions, insanities, neuroses, and psychoses, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Unless you're visiting us from the mothership, everyone in the Zoom meeting is aberrated in one shape, form, or fashion. Okay.
That's right.
Say what?
So that's right.
Yes, ma'am. Another ayat in the Holy Quran says, and if thy Lord had pleased, all those who are in the earth would have believed, all of them, without then force men till they are believers. So if Allah wanted, everyone would believe, correct?
Yes, sir.
But it seems as though Allah gives each one of us the free will to make our own decision. And perhaps that could be the meaning behind the day of judgment. Meaning what? We all have to make a judgment. We have to, and also in the Holy Quran, they talk about the day of decision, correct?
Yes.
Okay, we have to make a decision in this day and time that we're living in. And that decision is, do we strive to fight in this war within ourselves? Or do we say, forget it, and then give in, and then we go off in that direction? But that's the jihad. If one is forced to do something, then they already possess a counter effort toward the thought, action, or activity that's being forced upon them. In other words, there's no compulsion in religion. Because if someone has to force us in what we say we believe, that means we already have a counterforce against it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay. If someone has to force us to pay charity, if we have to be forced to make our prayers, if we have to be forced to do certain things, that means we already have a counterforce that's present. And it reminds me of the minister when he said that during the time of Moses, the law was present and people would obey the law, which gave them the appearance of compliance. But within their heart, there was still the desire to do evil and wickedness, correct?
Yes, sir.
So he said that during the time of Jesus, Jesus says, if you thought about it in your mind, then you've already committed the act. So with the coming of Jesus, with the coming of that individual that represents mercy, it is the removal of that thought in the mind, so that even though the law is present, we have a love and appreciation for the law. And we're just not following the law out of fear, but we're following the law because it is a light unto our feet. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Excuse me, sir. You said it's a lightning to our what?
Our light, a light unto our feet.
Feet?
Feet, meaning as the light shines, it illuminates the path in front of us.
That's right.
Mhm. Go ahead, Sister Anya.
I really, that what you said there really resonated with me about the day of judgment. And the valley of decision, or the day of decision, because it's when we make up our mind and say we believe, when we accept the teachings, it's oftentimes that we are then faced with a big trial. And in the Quran, it says, do men think that they will be left alone on saying we believe and will not be tried? And so indeed we tried those before them, so Allah will certainly know those who are true, and He will know the liars. So that that judgment we make in saying that we believe, then the trial comes to see if we're going to withstand, if we're going to hold true to what we say we believe. And we just happened to be having a discussion over the weekend, a group of us, on that very same subject of why is it that, as soon as we accept, say we accept these teachings, that a trial comes, or as soon as we say we do, I do in a marriage, then you're beset with a trial. So I just was saying that really resonated with me.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. And I see Sister Peggy put Romans 7:15-25, and that is exactly what I was speaking about, that war that's going on. If you look at the 7th chapter of Romans, it's really talking about the relationship between the analytical mind and the reactive mind, but it's given in the context of biblical language. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. If you look at the 6th chapter of Romans, the 6th chapter of Romans talks about those that were dead in sin. So it doesn't mean that people would be resurrected from a physical resurrection. If you look at the words dead in sin, it's more speaking about individuals that were so caught up in sinful thoughts and behavior, but they will be resurrected from those thoughts and that behavior. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
So when we're stuck in the world, we are dead in sin, and our resurrection is pulling us up out of the old behaviors. Coming from the perspective of the tech allows us to get to the source of why we are committing the sin, because the sin is not based on the fact that we are bad people. The sin that we are engaged in the language of the tech, are the compulsions and the habits based on things that were forced upon us when we were children. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay. Go ahead, Sister Angela.
I'm glad you said that. Can you please marry this, especially to the students? I'm glad Sister Denise shared about her teacher and the 100 math problems. And this, when we are embarking upon a thing like Sister Anya just mentioned, like deciding to go back to school and going to college and getting math, and how this is all, how it correlates to the relationship between what we're talking about and being a student. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So what did you want me to do, Sister Angela?
Connect the dots because some of us may not understand that this evening that happens even in work and school has to do with what you just said, something that happened to us in our childhood. So when it comes to math, I think you did it last week.
Oh, okay.
Math especially.
Okay. So just to address that briefly, if we look at the fact that, look at what L. Ron Hubbard said about the 6th dynamic and that force being very, very important. But if you look back, or if we look back at our childhood is, if we look at our childhood based on education, okay, each one of us may be able to pinpoint a teacher that gave us the most problems while we were in school. And even as saying it, a face, a name, and a classroom probably came up in someone's mind, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
So you're able to pinpoint that on the time track. And the funny thing about it, it just popped in my head, and I thought it was funny what her. I just looked at what her name is. Her name was my second grade teacher. Her name was Miss Wrath.
Wow.
Miss second grade teacher. I was at Lincoln Elementary School, and I just remember this lady as being just a mean person. And then thinking of another, going down the time track, my mind is flying now. And the names of these people, Miss Rips. Her name was Rips.
Rips and Rav, huh?
Yeah, Rips and Wrath. She was my either 7th grade or 8th grade history teacher. Her name was Miss Rips. But I remember Miss Wrath, 2nd grade. But we have these teachers from our past that, and I know some of us, we did this. When it was time to go up to the board, we would look in the other direction. It's kind of like sometimes when we have our cameras on, and then I might pose a question, some of us might look off and look around because we don't want to make no eye contact. We did the same thing in the classroom because we either didn't do the homework or we didn't understand the homework. So we knew if we went up to the front of the room, we were going to embarrass ourselves. Some of us even went as far as knowing that when it was time to do that, can I go to the restroom? We would leave to try to dodge that bullet. Because when we go to the board and we would be given the problem, either the teacher was gonna invalidate us, or we already knew if we got the problem wrong, we had to turn around and look in the eyes of the classroom, and there was individuals in the room that didn't like us anyway, and they would make fun of us. But what hurt us the most is when those that we thought were our friends invalidated us. And some of us, I believe, still experience that in modern time, right?
Correct.
So when you look at English lesson number C1, it says, well, why does he fear now that he's a grown man? Because he was taught to eat the wrong food when he was a child. That is a principle, or we could say an equation that represents why are we fearful of mathematics now as an adult?
Right.
It's because we were taught to be afraid of it when we were a child. If you look at the nurse and the needle in the brain, when the teacher disrespected us in the classroom, or when the teacher invalidated us in the classroom, that was like an authority figure sticking a needle in our brain. But that is done by design, because the Most High Elijah Muhammad says that we are people of high civilization, so that it is our destiny to be back at the top of civilization. But one of the things that we need to understand is we need to understand mathematics to get there, correct?
Right.
The Most High Elijah Muhammad said that when you deal with the mathematics and the science, this is page 312 of Closing the Gap, that is the language of a scientist. Minister Farrakhan says that the purpose of the Savior is to give us the teachings that will break the circle of the gods and bring us all into that circle, correct?
Yes, sir.
We can't get back into the circle of the gods dancing on TikTok. Okay, we can't get into the circle of gods based on how many likes we have on Instagram.
Right.
Okay, so we're living in an environment that they're constantly keeping us focused on trivial things.
Nothing. Right.
And so there was an individual that said, when you look at TikTok in China, where TikTok originated, where it's rooted, their TikTok is different than ours. The TikTok in China, they show the children over there doing mathematics, physics, and chemistry and science and all those things that uplift their environment. We got people twerking at Mickey D's and doing stupid challenges of setting themselves on fire in this country. You know, in the other countries, they're dealing with mathematics, physics, and chemistry and high science, and we're seeing how many hot dogs we can eat in an hour. It doesn't make it, well, it makes sense, but it doesn't make sense. So, but we've been programmed to be afraid of mathematics and science, because it's the math and science that will increase the frequency of our thinking and unlock that ancient wisdom that, as Mother Tanetta would teach, that wisdom that's already in us. Our ignorance keeps that wisdom locked up, increasing our thought power, our brain power, or the force of our beingness is what will unlock the God force within us. That it's like we're the modern day X-Men, if that makes any sense.
Mhm.
So does that answer your question, Sister Angela?
Absolutely, thank you.
All praises due to Allah.
Yeah, thank you, Professor X.
Say what? No, I'm not Professor X. Professor X he's on the wheel.
Yes,
Mm.
sir.
or at least in Chicago.
Well, you were an ex at one point, right? We all are. We have
all
to
were.
pass
Yes, ma'am.
through. That's just a kind reminder in Closing the Gap, page 122, that Allah came to make us equal with the scientists that wrote history in advance. So praise be to Allah. I think he was correct, Professor X.
Yes, ma'am.
And you be stormed, Sister Angela.
Oh, stop it.
Yeah, she definitely would tear some stuff up. Straight up.
Oh, funny.
Did someone else
Praise
hand up? Is that you, Sister Patricia?
Yes, sir. You know, you brought something up about the different nationalities and countries and the mindset of you know, because the USA, you know, everybody run here because you can do what you want to do, and you know, any kind of way. And there was this factory in Jackson, Michigan. It was a Japanese factory called Maggie, and you know, they brought their own. And before they start work, he would have everyone do exercise. So when you're in an environment that is lazy, smoke marijuana, drink, watch movies all night long, and you going to work, you're not expecting to do exercise before you go and start whatever department you work in. But when you're doing that, and you spoke of it earlier, it's waking you up and is making you disciplined. Because it's called the concentration of the mind. And when you concentrate better, when you're vibrant, you know, and you're alert, and when you're feeding yourself that kind of nutrition, then you go far in something like that. And at the beginning, you know, there was a lot of complaints, but if you wanted to remain working, you know, you have to follow suit. And so, you know, that's sad, but it's real what you said. We're here and our mindset is not learning math and science. You know, we're learning stupid stuff and setting yourself on fire, as you say, you know, that, what is that? What is this attention? You know, you just want attention, you know, with all this stuff. Then you go back to the root of it. Something triggered you as a child and you didn't get the attention then. So you say, let me make myself known. You see these individuals, you know, green hair, pink hair, blue hair, you know, nose pierce, eyes pierce, cheek pierce. I'm like, ouch, you pierce your cheek, you know, what the heck? And, you know, it's bad enough. And it's attention. And then, you know, being in a USA where we can do those things. You know, we're putting, I don't want to go too deep in this, but we're putting breasts on men. You know, we're doing some sick stuff. We're taking a sperm cell and an ovary and putting it in somebody else's body, as they call surrogate, you know, test tube babies. That's what they are. And then they get to grow up and their mind is not right because you got 3, 4 different DNA in your head. How can, you know, get to that? If a person is put into another person's body, how can Dianetics, or is it even a way to help that person? Because if you're taking a sperm from a male, you take an egg from a female, and then you placing both of them in somebody else's body, then they growing up in a mindset. Can Dianetics be helpful for that person?
Well, I can't touch that one. I would assume, based on what the text says outside of some type of organic trauma to the brain, that the tech of Dianetics could work. So I'm going to assume that it's still possible. But you're right. If you look at the fact that trauma can be passed on genetically, So now you got the two parents. Now you have that implanted in the womb of a third person. You don't know what state of mind they have or what trauma they have or what, because trauma is chemical, correct?
Yes.
So now you have the trauma of the two parents, and now you have the trauma of this third person. So now this child comes to birth with the trauma of 3 genetic lines. I'm sure the tech could handle it, but in all honesty, Sister Patricia, that question is above my pay grade. I would have to bring that to one of the individuals in the org that are higher up on the skill of auditing on the various levels, because that's actually a very good question. That's a very good question. I'm interested in that now. I'm gonna actually pose that question to someone that I know that can handle that question.
Yes, sir. It's something seriously to think about, because if we're here to do, when grief comes and the auditors are supposed to help, that's a challenge. You know, you may not even know that though. You know, and you're working hard 12, 15, 16, 24 hours, whatever it takes, and there's no breakthrough. What? You know, why? And so I don't know. I mean, there's something, we have to be mindful of so much goes on and prepare ourselves, because we have a lot that's in front of us. And how can we handle it? This is good that we're learning this, because if we feed ourselves right mentally, then like you said, we'll be able to spot. And I think we were talking about that a couple of weeks ago. You would know if a person elaborated just by their language. How, and I'm glad you said it, because I've been really I ain't like dug into people's face, but I'll be paying attention to that now, because it can help me not be in such a dispute with a person. Really, I know how to handle that person a little bit better. So I'm not searching, but when I interact with individual, oh, that's at the top. I'm like, okay, let me listen to this language real well, So I'm glad you installed that to us, to be alert to that, because that is very important. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Go ahead, Sister Angela.
I'm sorry, I was trying to unmute. I find the case inventory very strategic tool and something like that. Also, in the case inventory, when you're asking a person to name their maternal and paternal grandparents, what were their relationships like, you can kind of see how limited their information is about the family, and that can be an alert to whether this person was adopted or result of a surrogate. And also I would use the valence shift method to see if they jump from many valences, and then kind of guide them to the probability, especially if the valence is so multiple dominant, there's so many valences. Is it possible that these are not your natural parents, or this wasn't your first situation as far as childhood and growing up?
My thought when you talk about that case inventory, if you look at an equation, okay, if you look at an equation, in that equation, you have something called a variable, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that variable, if you deal with an equation, sometimes comes in the form of a letter. And that's usually where you input a number in order to do a calculation, correct?
Right.
Okay, so for example, when we talk about the circumference of the planet Earth, and we know the circumference is 24,896 miles, the way we get to that number is we have a formula that's pi, which is 3.141 times the diameter, correct?
Right.
Okay, so the letter D represents diameter, and that's where we input the number in order to calculate, in order to find agreement with that number that represents the circumference of the planet Earth, correct?
Yes, sir.
When we do a case inventory, we're making a list of all the inputs
Mm-hmm.
that we're going to plug into the individual that'll help us understand the output, which is the aberrated behavior.
Right.
So if we hear a circuit, the circuit is real. It has to be one of these people in the case inventory.
Right.
That circuit had to come from someone because there's no mystery God.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why the case inventory is so important.
It is.
All the individuals, all of the places, and then it goes into whether any phrases or statements that your family members used to say, whether there's anything specific that they used to do. These all become, remember the word variable.
Mm-hmm.
When you clear the word variable, it's going to bring you directly to the word aberrant. So a person's aberration is based on an unknown variable. We see the behavior, but we don't know the cause.
Right.
The cause is one of the valences. It's one of the people in the case inventory. But now when you look at how Sister Patricia just dropped that bomb on us, what happens if the person doesn't even know that there's a third person? The auditor has to be aware, okay, here's all the variables, here's all the inputs, but I'm not making a connection. There has to be something else there. There's something that I'm missing. I think he called it a hidden variable or hidden influence. There's something there that I'm missing, that I have to find it so I can account for this dramatization or this valence shift. I got to figure out what valence that is.
Right.
That case inventory is very important. Thank you for that one.
It is.
Okay, let's get back to this. Okay, everyone can see the PowerPoint?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The right way and error. So the verse is, the right way is indeed clearly distinct from error. The Arabic word for right way is rashad. So for those that are new, what we do is we actually do the word clearing on the Arabic in the Holy Quran, and we find the connection between the Arabic in the Holy Quran and the terminology found in Dianetics. It means to be on the right way, to follow the right course. The word rashad also means integrity of conduct. It means reason. It means rationality, spiritual guidance, and morality. So that word rashad, if you look at the definitions that are connected to that word in Arabic, if you read the Introduction to Scientology Ethics, which is this green book, if you can see it. Can everyone see the green book? Oh, no, you might not be able to see it just yet.
Yes, sir.
Oh, you see it? Okay. If you were to go into this book at another time and take the course, you'll see a lot of these words that are found in the Arabic are also found in the tech, or what we can call ethic technology. So the right way is equivalent to the concepts of ethics, morality, and responsibility. It says it's clearly distinct, and that comes from the Arabic word bayan, which means to become clear, plain, visible, to separate or to sift, to prove in the end, and to examine. So the thought that came to mind when I found this Arabic word was that the time in which we're living in is a time of separation. It's a time of sifting. And it's to provide proof in the end of time. Does everyone understand end of time, what we're talking about? Okay, the end of time is this time of judgment that we're living in. And this could be part of an examination where we are all being sifted. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we have to make a judgment. We have to make a decision. The word error is gai. It means to stray from the right course. It means to seduce, to tempt, to entice, to mislead, to bait, or to ensnare. Now, when I saw this word ensnare, I immediately thought about interbulated theta. Okay, that's a science of survival terminology. Interbulated theta, which is called in theta, and that represents the thetan, which is the individual that is ensnared or being controlled by the mesh universe. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the universe is cause and the thetan is effect. The universe says jump and we say how high and when can I come down? Does that make sense? Okay,
Yeah.
and that takes place below 2.0. So when we come home at night and we're already burnt out, our mind is tired from whatever our job is, we come home, one of the things we want to do is grab something to eat. We might want to sit down and watch some programs. So we're already interbulated, and now we're going to be interbulated even more. So it says in the Dianetic Technical Dictionary, a thought or a life which is based on lies and confusions are slanderous, choppy, or destructive in an attempt to overwhelm or suppress a person or group. That is the purpose behind television. It's feeding us lies and confusions. It's giving us slander. You know, when you look at the news, you know, 1 minute they're saying one thing, the next minute they're saying another, and they're constantly going back and forth. The news is choppy, information is destructive, and what it does is I get to the point where you don't even want to watch the news anymore because it's just suppressing. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
So when you look at it from the mathematical standpoint, being interbulated, an error produced by incorrect data. That's called the held down 7. Okay. So the right way would lead up the tone scale, correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So the way of error would lead down the tone scale. The right way is found in the disbelief of the devil and a belief in Allah. So we're still going based on the ayat from the Holy Quran, but now we're gonna start to tie it a little bit more into the text. The scripture says that this is the firmest handle which shall never break. So disbelief in the devil. Well, in this context, the Arabic word for devil is taga or taga, T-A-G-H-A, and it means to exceed proper bounds or limits. It means to flood, which is an allegory for the time that we're in now. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, it does.
To outweigh, to dominate, or outbalance. So when we look at disbelief in the devil, and we're looking at the word devil from the perspective of exceeding proper limits, the flood and whatnot, it means we could be surrounded in an environment where the behaviors all around us are exceeding the limits. Does that make sense?
America. Yes, sir.
This is America.
So now we're being asked to come into an ark to get out of the flood, to get out of the environment that's causing what? Oppression, suppression, and repression, because these are all the meanings of the Arabic word, which also means devil. So suppression is a devil. Repression equals devil. So when you look at the fact that we're in an environment that is constantly using counter efforts to get us to eat more Big Macs and drink more this and Powerade and eat more chicken wing. You know, we're just an environment that's based on counter efforts to get us to stay in the level of our appetite. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Okay. So, back in the day when we were raised in the church, we actually thought that in the time of judgment, there was going to be actual floods, but, everything is for real. In my humble opinion, we are in the flood right now, but the flood is an emotional one.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So disbelief in the devil could mean, if we disbelieve in the devil, that means we are striving to live within the bounds or limits. We're looking to find a place of refuge during the time of the flood. Remember, Noah's son said, I'm going to take myself to a mountain, meaning I don't want the ark that you built. I don't want to come into the safety zone that you have given. I'm going to go find something that's separate from what you have provided. And then what happened to him?
Wow.
Okay. To disbelieve in the devil means to remove ourselves from environments where behaviors exceed the limits. We want to remove oppression, we want to move suppression, and we want to move repression. We want to do that for ourselves with the tech, and we want to understand the tech so well that we can do it for one another. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Okay.
Yes, yes. That's the goal.
So in other words, from the biblical standpoint, we want to be in the world, but not of it.
See.
Lay hold on the firmest handle. The firmest handle that will not break. To lay hold in Arabic means to restrain, to keep away from, or to remain calm. And the word grasp from the Merriam-Webster dictionary means to lay hold of with the mind, comprehend, or to understand. So to lay hold of the firmest handle is to have an understanding of what it is that we're going through and have an understanding of what others are going through so we can apply the tech in the best manner. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. The firmest handle in Arabic means to place one's trust, confidence, or faith. Okay. The minister gave us tech, supreme wisdom, supreme tech. He says, the greatest gift I can give you after giving the supreme wisdom, he said, what? Was the supreme technology that will allow us to gain access to it, correct? I'm paraphrasing. That's not the exact quote, but we understand that?
Yes, sir.
The tech is a tool that will allow us to not just recite the lessons, but the supreme wisdom is like a medicine with a child-proof cap on it. And we can say, yeah, I got the medicine, but if we can't take some of us have had to wrestle, get the child-proof cap off, correct?
That's right.
Okay. So having the medicine doesn't mean that we can take the correct dosage at the right time. We got to know how to take the cap off.
Exactly.
Okay. So the firmest handle also means to enter in agreement, meaning we have to have ARC with Allah, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Affinity, reality, and communication. Okay. When you look at agreement in ARC, it's the same as the word covenant. So an ARC break, in Dianetics, that's called a break in agreement. In a biblical or scriptural standpoint, that's breaking a covenant. Okay. And the handle means the grip, take possession of, handle, a bond of friendship. So we want to have a relationship with the Savior. We want to have a relationship with Allah. We want to have ARC. We want to have affinity, reality, and communication. And that is the firmest handle. I've heard the minister say it like this, and I'm paraphrasing it, but he says, the only place of refuge in this day and time is in the bosom of Allah. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Go ahead, Sister Anya.
It, this may not mean anything, but just a question. When you look at the word firm, and as it is in the sentence firmest handle, then that's an adjective. When you give your definitions as if it's a verb.
Mhm.
So could you give more insight on that?
Sure. In Arabic, the words are given as verbs, but they're also given as nouns. So one word, there's a root word, but that root word can be a verb, but it can also be given in the context of a noun. They're both. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So in other words, even if you look in the Merriam-Webster dictionary, you can look at a word in the English dictionary, and you'll get one form of the word will be a verb. That just gives us the action. But that same word can be given to describe a noun. It could have another context as an adjective. So really they're interchangeable.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Okay, yes, ma'am. And then when you look at the handle that will not break, well, a break is an invalidation, correct?
Mhm.
Yes, yes.
So then we could say, as long as we stay connected to Allah, that is the firmest handle, and we will never be invalidated if we maintain that connection.
That's true.
Okay. So whenever we engage in an activity that is not in harmony with our wants, our needs, or desires, it produces an ARC break. And an ARC break is what's called enforced ARC or inhibited ARC, meaning if someone is forcing something on us, at the same time someone is forcing something on us, they are inhibiting what we want to do. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay, that's called an ARC break. If we are not in ARC agreement with Allah and the laws of Islam, then living under a law without agreement is the same, it should be the same as living according to compulsion. And this is where we're going to get into the tech of why compulsion is not in the religion. What does compulsion actually produce? Okay. Compulsion in the tech causes a whole cycle of things to start to take place. So when you're looking at the context of responsibility, L. Ron Hubbard says, in order to make up one's mind to be responsible for things, it is necessary to get over the idea that one is being forced into responsibility. So our religion, our teachings restores self-determinism, which is equivalent to responsibility. So responsibility is an important thing. Why? Because responsibility is self-determinism. Responsibility and self-determinism is directly correlated to the mesh universe and the control of mesh universe. Does that make sense?
Mhm. Yes, sir.
Okay. In other words, take charge of your post. What is that? That's responsibility.
That's right.
And I've heard the minister say that, if you see garbage in front of the mosque,
Mhm.
you don't wait for someone else to clean it. He says, take charge. So in our taking charge of certain things in our environment, we're showing responsibility by controlling the meshed universe in our environment. But if we put it, well, it's not my responsibility to do that. That's that person's responsibility. What we're saying is that the meshed universe has control over us. I'm not doing it. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Now, it doesn't mean we go and try to clean up everybody's mess. Okay. But if there's certain things in our own environment, our own household, there's certain things that we have, if we see it, just take care of it. That way we don't have to see it anymore. Take
That's
control
what
of
we
our
say.
post. He says the power of choice is senior to responsibility. What one does against his will operates as overt against oneself. But where one's will to do has deteriorated to unwillingness to do anything, lack of will is itself an aberration. So if our will is going in one direction and our actions are counter efforts, then our day is full of self-negation. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So we have a desire to do certain things, but our physical body is working directly against us. That is the jihad. Everyone follow?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, there's no compulsion in religion. So if religion was being forced on us, then that means we already have a counter effort. So then our religion, which is meant to free us, becomes a re-stimulation that increases our aberration, correct?
Yes.
So that is one way to respond to why isn't there compulsion in religion? Based on the way the text describes it, if there was compulsion in religion, then our religion would actually re-stimulate us. All of us have to grow at our own rates. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Minister
sir.
Farrakhan said one time that you can throw grass seed all over the lawn, and then some might grow over here, some might grow over here. It's not going to grow uniformly. He said because the different seeds are going to grow at different rates. So each individual, with respect to the teachings, we're going to grow at different levels, at different speeds over different time periods. Okay. Go ahead, Sister Jan.
Yes, sir. Family. If I may just add at this point, I'm observing that one time I heard the minister say that we are the God of our own self-creation. And then I heard him years ago saying that there's no God outside of ourselves that's going to, condemn us or anything. It's the God that's up in us. And that goes with what I've learned in Scientology about the downward spiral that we go on when we keep going in this aberrated path, okay? But one thing that is encouraging to me as we are on this journey to become God is how much we are responsible, we are cause over everything that happens to us. When you go back and trace back everything, that we're the source point of it. And if we can learn it and feel it, understand that, then that would give us the power that we need to overcome any darkness that would come our way. And I think that's where I'm going to leave it. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. That makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense. Allah says in the Holy Quran like this: Allah does not change the condition of a people until they change their own condition. So that is our goal. We have to realize that we are the source point. L. Ron Hubbard talks about, and this was in one of the lectures. I think it was in the Factors. It was either the Factors or the Philadelphia Doctrine course. He talked about two universes. He talked about the universe on the outside and the universe within. And he used the word, the universe within, as the potential universe. And the goal was to understand that the universe within was more powerful than the one without.
So
that our own universe is actually to have control over the mesh universe on the outside.
Wow, awesome.
And then he also explained the meaning of Scientology 8-8008, representing 8. The first 8 is infinity. And then when you get to the first 8, it represents the infinity of the mesh universe, that we have to reduce that down to 0. And then we have to take the 0 of ourself and increase it to the infinity of the universe. So we have to reduce right now, the mesh universe is the cause over us, and we are effect, because we see the universe as greater than ourselves, and we see
Yes, sir.
ourselves as so little. But in
Right.
the Philadelphia Doctrine course, the goal was to reverse that. The universe, you got to reduce it down and realize, no, the universe is not as powerful or as strong as you think. What is contained in the individual, Satan, is actually more powerful than the mesh
Wow.
universe. Because he says there's the laws of the mesh universe and the laws of the Satan, and the laws of the Satan or the static are outside of the mesh universe. Those laws produce the mesh universe. So we are not mesh universe. Our physical body is meshed. We are the part of that life static. That which is within us is greater than the universe. Okay. How is that given to us in the teachings? The Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad said that the original God who created himself from triple darkness is no longer here, but his person exists in his people today. And Minister Farrakhan has spoke about and made mention of the life force. The life force is greater than the mesh universe. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And we are not the mesh. We are that life force that exists at a greater frequency than the mesh universe. If that all makes sense. And that's what we have to do. We have to get that fact in our head. And that's the whole point of the teachings, is to break out of the old thought that we're just this physical body existing. No, we're greater than that. As the counter efforts increase, then we are suppressed into inactivity. Go ahead, Sister Jan. You got your hand up again, Sister Jan? Okay.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
That's
I
okay.
had to get off mute. If I may just say a little bit here,
Mhm.
that's where I think it's so important that we undergo this Dianetics processing
Mhm.
and go and the training, because all those books, even if all we ever study are those books that have to do with Dianetics, we're talking Dianetics, the modern science of mental health, your
Mhm.
self-analysis, your science of survival, your axioms and procedures. If we go through those studies, those are your training,
Mhm.
and your processing will be your Dianetics. That's, I believe, will address this rehabilitation of the God being.
Mhm.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. You're 100% correct. 100% correct. Remember, family, and I said it before, and I'm gonna say it again. The Most High Elijah Muhammad says, and our Savior has arrived. Talked about the judgment. He said the judgment will begin 1,380 years after the death of the prophet, up to 1,400 years after the death of the prophet. And he says on page 81 of Our Savior Has Arrived, that process would be a 20-year period where our mind would be made clean. That the whole root of us that causes us to sin would be removed, and that at a certain time we would not even be able to sin. The brown germ would be actually removed from us. And I'm looking at, is it possible that the brown germ represents the reactive mind? I haven't been able to clarify that yet, but that's the line I'm going down. Brown germ being likened unto the reactive mind. And he also says in Our Savior Has Arrived that at a certain time we won't even remember the things of this world. Now, if this judgment begins 1,380 years after the death of the prophet, and he passed in 632 AD, based on the calculations in the words of the Most High Elijah Muhammad, that means the judgment would begin in 2012, which is the exact time period where we were introduced to the tech of Dianetics as a whole or as a group. Does that make sense? And in 2012, if we go back and look at the old final call, 2012 was the first time that the tech was offered from Mas Mariam or from Chicago. And that was actually in the final call newspaper. So could we say we're in the 20-year period now? Based on what the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad has given us, I would say yes. So there's a direct correlation between the tech and the years that we're in right now. And I don't think it's a coincidence that during Savior's Day 2011, I don't think it's a coincidence that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan said during the lecture, he says, I found something 35 years ago. I thought that was interesting. Because I believe 2011, was that the first time that the Church of Scientology actually had a booth set up at Savior's Day?
It's possible because we had the big seminar the year before.
Right, so he had 2010, 2011, but I'll say 2010, 2011. But now for the minister to say, I found something 35 years ago, and now the Church of Scientology is there, what came to my mind was, we make them study 35 to 50 years before they can come among us and do trade. Okay, that's the thought that came to my mind. Okay, let's see if we can start to land this plane here a little bit. We have to do a part 2. Everyone sees the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay. So now the building of the will, this is where study guides number 5 through 8 are so important, because we have to build the force and power of the will. And the minister says that, he says that desire feeds the will. Okay. So when we look at Ohm's law, when we look at that current that goes through the wire, you know, you have the voltage, which is the pressure that pushes the current through the wire, and it has to be strong enough to get past the resistance in the wire in order to make the light come on. Does that make sense?
Perfect sense.
Okay, so that whole thing of a circuit and a light is a demo kit that we could say the voltage, the desire feeds the will. So we have to have a desire that feeds our will, and the resistance represents the reactive mind, our engrams or our locks that has to push through so that our light can get brighter. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So then he says, there is nothing wrong basically with doing this, but where one is doing something he is unwilling to do, aberration results. This is why there's no compulsion in religion. So if someone is forced to pray or forced to pay charity or forced to do this or forced to do that, then what happens is that individual will become aberrated on the very thing that's supposed to free him. One does in such a case while unwilling to do. The result is doing this without responsibility. Okay. The compulsion leads to what he calls overts. He says, forcing people who do not want to work to yet work, which stimulates the mechanism of overt acts with thereby a higher and higher crime ratio, more and more strikes, and less understanding of what it is all about. An overt act, he says, is a harmful act or transgression against the moral code of a group. And it's called an overt act or an overt. When a person does something that is contrary to the moral code he has agreed to, or when he omits to do something he should have done per the moral code, he has committed an overt act. An overt act violates what was agreed upon. It's similar to breaking a covenant. And we remember in the Holy Quran where it talks about the breaking of the covenants. Yes. Anyone?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then he talks about what's called an overt act motivator sequence. Go ahead, Sister Peggy. You're on mute.
Sorry, my apologies.
It's okay.
So then, you know, we've heard people use that phrase, there's no compulsion in religion.
Mm-hmm.
So it just so happens that today we had a meeting at the mosque for the officers. And we were talking about a problem we were dealing with. And one brother said, no, there is no compulsion in religion, but is Islam a religion?
Well, Islam, it says that based on what we have been given, Islam was given to us as a religion.
Religion. people will jump up and say, well, it's just a lifestyle, so it's not anything that's a big deal. But yeah, I just thank you for saying that.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
just kind of wanted to get your opinion of that. If that was someone maybe just trying to use language in a certain way to maybe confuse, but
So what you're saying is it possible that and again, I'm not trying to judge or put words in anyone's mouth, but you're saying that it's possible that sometimes we try to use justification to get around certain things.
yes, and then the brother was saying that, really, Islam is not a religion, so you can't use that. He says, we can't use that because it's something that we signed up for.
That's true.
Signed up for it. We signed up for some of this. We signed up for it. We didn't sign up for all of the bad treatment, but there are some things that we did sign up for because we wanted to be in the ark. Okay.
But you gotta also remember it was given to us as a religion.
Okay.
Okay. So now we have to make that applicable to both sides because we can't apply law. And again, I'm not trying to judge laborers or officers.
Yeah.
But with the same rule and law that we apply to the believers, we're always told there's no big I's and little U's. But sometimes there are, and we have to realize that the same laws that are applied to those that are not in authority. Last time I remember looking through the book called The Proper Way of Handling People, there's a lot of things taking place that aren't followed in that book.
Yes, sir.
So it has to be even across the board.
Okay.
So
well, thank you for that.
Praise be to Allah. I hope I pray Allah that it's correct.
Well, I was just thinking that was just another way of looking at it, and I just wanted to know what you thought about that, or what any member of the family thinks about that. I just thought it was really interesting.
Okay, if it's given to us as a religion, then we got to go by what we have been taught by the minister and what we've been taught by the Most High Elijah Muhammad. It was given to us as a religion. And we got to be very careful when we start trying to find, like the minister says, using this. I'm not saying that they were using deceptive intelligence.
Right.
We have to be very careful of trying to find loopholes. Okay. It's like, sometimes, and I'll use myself as an example, I might say I'm going to fast or do this, that, and the other. And then I go to work and they say, they're fixing something. And then I say, well, in Islam, we're told that, if someone offers you food, then, so now I'm looking for a loophole to justify eating when really it's just the fact that I don't feel like fasting. You know what I'm saying?
Got
it. So
Given a reason.
I'm using deceptive intelligence to make evil fair seeming.
Yes.
Go ahead, Sister Sultana.
Yes, salam alaikum.
Salam.
So in reference to Islam being religion, in the Surah Al-Ma'idah, the third surah, it says, this day I have perfected your religion for you.
Thank you.
Doesn't say your way of life. It says your religion for you.
Thank you.
And completed my favor upon you and have chosen you for you Islam as your religion.
Thank you.
That's in the Surah 3, Al-Ma'idah.
All right. That's called a stable datum.
And in speaking on force, Surah 13, Ayah 15, all that is in the heavens and the earth prostrate itself, whether willingly or by force, before Allah, and so do their shadows in the morning and the evening.
If you could just
force.
Yes, if you could type that reference into the chat so we can have it.
Inshallah, yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Sister Denise.
I was thinking that the best religion is to do unto others. That's what I was thinking about as you was talking about. I remember my mother telling me, don't force them to do anything. I was like, wait a minute now. I'm the adult here. They're the child. and she was saying you have to entice them.
Mhm.
I said, you know, I got to work at it with these kids. It's like, yes, you know, you have to entice them, be interesting. I said, what? No, just do what I say. I'm thinking that's the way to get it. This compulsory and what it does to people over time. You know, that a person, my mama forced me to eat that, I never eat that again. You know, things like that. One might say in their mind, and then that caused aberrations as well. So I can understand. And then Paul was talking about the law. In his books, he has a whole thing on law. And the minister said, this next generation will love the law. And when you love something, it's not begrudging or, oh, I got this. You know, it's like it happens automatically because now you love the law and you and the law become one. So it's like you don't do that because you know, because you're a Muslim, you don't eat pork because you're a Muslim. I said, not only that, I only because it's against my body. You know? So so I was thinking about the extension of a thing, because you may look at it and look at that stop sign and say, oh, that's the law, I can't run it. And then but then when you see when you run it and you cause an accident and folks die, now all of a sudden the law, you know, becomes a way of life, you know, that you wouldn't want to do. That's what I'm thinking about as you was talking. Go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. Well, let's look at the universe as a demo kit for a split second. Because if you look at the Earth, doesn't the moon pull on the Earth? The moon pulls on the water from the Earth, correct?
Yes, sir, it does.
Okay, so the moon pulls on the Earth, and as a result of the moon pulling on the Earth, the moon, because for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, correct?
That's right.
But the
10-4.
sun doesn't pull the Earth, the sun attracts. So there's a difference between pulling on and attracting. Okay, when you pull on something, there's automatically a counterforce. So that would be like compulsion. But when you attract, then there's no counterforce because now you're in harmony with. So if we look at the Earth, the sun, and the moon, that is a demo kit we can use to show the difference between enforced ARC. The moon is trying to enforce itself on the Earth by taking the water, but the sun doesn't enforce, it just attracts. And then as a result of the sun attracting, well, what does it do to attract? The sun gives light, life, and power, causes it to rotate. So now if you have two people to choose from, if you have a person that's constantly taking without giving anything back, and you have a person that's willing to give everything and not asking anything in return, which direction are you going to go in?
Excellent point.
Okay. So the sun, Earth, and the moon is an excellent demo kit to represent that. Okay, let's see if we can start to bring this in. So the overact motivator sequence goes as follows. It's kind of like, I was looking at this as like a cycle of action. So we commit an overt act. An overt act is anything that we do that goes against the moral code. So now for us, if we look at the restrictive law, and if we look at the general rules of conduct that's found in our restrictive law of Islam booklet, anything we do against that is an overt. But now what happens is whenever we commit an overt, there's a motivator that's identified by us. Does that make sense? Something had to motivate the overt act, and that motivator is called the justification. Okay, so we commit the act. We had to identify there was a motive behind the act, and that motive becomes justification. In the language of Islam, that's called deceptive intelligence.
Yes.
Yes.
That's the deceptive intelligence. Allah says in the Holy Quran, making evil fair seeming. So what happens is, in order to make evil fair seeming, you have to justify doing it. Does that make sense, family?
Mhm. Right.
Okay. If we look at this from the biblical standpoint, Jesus went up into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil, correct?
Yes, yes.
The first trial was the devil said, turn these stones to bread. The second trial was the devil says, cast yourself off the temple, lest the angels will catch you before you dash your feet against the stones. And then the third trial was and took him up to the top of a high mountain and showed him the whole world. Says, if you bow to me, I'll give you all of this. This is allegory. Now, the way this is way that Brother Lukman look at this is, when you look at turning bread to stone, that could be what we do mentally, because you can't eat stone, but you can eat bread. So turning stone to bread could mean taking that which you know or we know we shouldn't be doing, and we justify doing it. But in order to, before we sin, we have to justify in our mind. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So mentally, the justification of something that goes against the law in the mind is represented allegorically as turning the stone to bread. Now, once we turn the stone to bread, once we justify the thought, now we have to put ourselves in the proper environment to connect our thought to what it is that we want to do. Take yourself off the temple so that the angels will catch you before your feet dash against the stone. Now, there was time in our past we were about to put ourselves in certain environments, and we know we shouldn't have done it, and we said to ourselves, well, God is going to protect me. So God was going to protect us by putting in our mind not to go to begin with. But we put ourselves in the environment. So now when we have the justified thought, and now we have the environment, now there's a choice. Because we can have the thought, we can be in the environment, and then we can say, I'm not going to do it, and then we leave. But the devil himself says, okay, now if you bow to me, you can have what it is that you came here for. That make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So
That's the overt act motivator sequence coming from the perspective of the Bible. And then overts accumulate like a fine mist that the naked eye can hardly detect. So constantly producing overts will accumulate in our mind and will actually produce failure.
Yep.
In other words, it's called karma. It's called karma. So what is the result of overt accumulation? Now, overt accumulation is not a tech, it's not tech terminology. That's just kind of the way I was looking at it from the perspective of Lost Found Muslim lesson number 2, question number 8. And a fine mist that the naked eye can hardly detect. It's called about accumulation. He says, and as we wander on, transgressing more, agreeing to new mores, and then transgressing those, we come into that sunless place, the prison of our tears and sighs, and might have beens and unhappiness. Okay. Before. But if you notice, if you look at the prison of our tears, that's the charge. That's the ACTH that's trapped in the body. And he talks about sighs, and he talks about unhappiness. In the Holy Quran, it says, on the day when it comes, no soul will speak except by his permission. So some of them will be unhappy and others happy. Then as for those who are unhappy, they will be in a fire. For them, there will be sighing and groaning. So in both of these instances, there is agreement between the text and the Holy Quran with the concept of unhappiness connected to sighing. And when you look in Science of Survival, when a person is constantly sighing, that's called repressed emotion. Does that make sense?
yes.
There's something that's being repressed. So there's something there, but the individual is not aware of the source of where that repression is. But a person is sighing. Okay. And I use that as a great example because I do it all the time and I have an idea of why, but I don't know the source of it. If that makes any sense. Okay. Go ahead, Sister Patricia.
What did I hit? I hit something wrong. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, I don't, there's something, I can't find my, oh, okay. When you say sighing,
Mhm.
are you talking about the moan and, what do you mean by sighing?
You ever get angry and you go,
Oh,
okay,
the noise, okay.
okay.
All right.
That can also represent repressed emotion, or what he calls misemotion. Misemotion. Go ahead, Sister Sultana.
There's a movie I came across as a Iranian movie
Mhm.
about a Muslim woman, and it's called The Legend of a Sigh. It's called The Legend of Sigh. Sorry, The Legend of Sigh.
Okay.
And she loses her husband and begins to imagine how her life could have, should have, would have been had she had made other choices. Had she made another choice, not to marry him and to go with the other person she was. And she winds up going through 4 different lifetimes of what she thought she wanted to become. And the sigh comes when she sits there and she sits at the table and starts thinking about it, and her husband's passing, and she goes, and then this man shows up, appears, looks like, kind of like a Jesus figure with all white.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, what are you doing here? He goes, you called me. She says, I didn't call you. He said, you sighed.
Mm.
He said, you sighed. And when I help anyone that sighs, and they sigh, I come to them and I help them. So then the movie progresses, and then she tells him all the things that she was hoping. He shows her all these lifetimes that she could have had, should have, would have had, but that her life that she chose was the life she was supposed to have.
Well, I definitely know what my assignment is. I got to find that movie.
Yes, it's an Iranian movie, has subtitles. I found
That's
it
fine.
back in the day when it was Blockbuster days.
Oh, Blockbuster. I'm sure we can find it. Thank you for that. That right there sounds like a jewel. Thank you, Sister Sultana. Okay, this processing and prayer. We mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, but we didn't dig into it. We're going to touch on this quickly. L. Ron Hubbard says, whenever doing something is accompanied by no will to do, irresponsibility for one's acts can result. So this is rehashing something, but we're about to move into something else. He says, basically then, when one is processing a PC or a pre-clear, one is seeking to rehabilitate a willingness to do. And that's what processing is. It's the increase in self-determinism, which is increasing our ability to confront and our willingness to do certain things. Does that make sense?
Sir.
Yes, sir.
In order to accomplish this, one must remove from the case the unwillingness to have done certain things and must rehabilitate the ability to withhold on the PC's own determinism, not by punishment, the further bad actions. In other words, what we're trying to remove from the case is the unwillingness to have done certain things. And then we want to rehabilitate the ability to withhold further bad actions. We want to rehabilitate the whole case. Only then will the PC be willing to recover from any wrong with the PC, since anything wrong with the PC is self-imposed, meaning we kind of keep ourselves in our own prison in order to prevent wrongdoing at some past time. Now, let's look at this real quick. If you look at the processing, what did it just say? We're looking at the irresponsibility for actions, rehabilitate willingness to do, correct?
Yes, sir.
Remove the unwillingness to do, and we want to rehabilitate the need to withhold further bad action. And only then will the PC be willing to recover from any wrong. Now that's processing, correct?
Yes, sir. Yes.
But now when you look at the prayer, it says, I've been greatly unjust to myself. Yes?
Mhm.
So I'm
Mhm.
recognizing the irresponsibility for my actions. I confess my faults. What am I saying? I'm willing to be rehabilitated. Please grant me protection. Again, same thing. Guide me to the best of morals. So when I'm saying grant me protection and guide me to the best of morals and turn away from me evil and indecent morals, what am I saying? Remove the unwillingness to do, rehabilitate the need to withhold further bad action. So is the prayer the same as processing?
Yes.
Okay. In other words, our own guilt is the glue that keeps us in a state of failure.
Mhm. No, we're talking. Yes.
And the minister says this, he says, fear restricts. He says, guilt restricts. He says, fear presupposes the absence of knowledge of what we fear. Guilt comes as a result of our knowledge of our violations of a standard of behavior. He says, you get rid of guilt. He says, Allah knew what we were before he chose us. His aim is to save us from our sins and to present us to the world spotless and without blemish. So we gotta let guilt go. And then real quick, we're gonna look at overts and withholds, and then we're gonna call it a night. Now, why is that overt and withhold is sitting before a trunk of gold and jewels? Can anyone think of why overts and withholds is like gold? He says, so if you discover a spot, and I'm looking at a spot as an over or withhold within yourself or a blemish, he says, do not retreat. Look at it with joy as though you have found precious gold or a precious stone. For every time we find a spot, quote unquote, an overt or a withhold or a blemish, and apply spot remover, which we could say is processing, we are a step closer to manifest proof that Allah has intervened in our lives. That's study guide number 8. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay. Overts, withholds, motivators, and justifications. So you start with the overt. Okay, so we break the law. We break it based on a motivator. And the motivator is something that we claim happened to us. Is Sister Jan still on?
I'm right here.
How does it sound so far? Are we going down the right road?
We are doing it. Yes, sir.
Okay, praise be to Allah. So we have what's called a motivator. That is something we say, well, it happened to me, so I'm doing it to others. And sometimes we will make up something. He called that a false motivator, if I'm not mistaken. So we make up something to justify what we do.
Mm-hmm.
So the motivator is a justification. Someone stole my money, so I'm taking someone else's. Okay. Then that results in a withhold. And a withhold is something that we've done that we don't talk about. Brother Abdul Sharif Muhammad years ago used to talk about the little black box. And he said, a little black box represents that thing we do that only Allah knows, that if it came to light, we would be ashamed. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense.
Okay, so unless we are visiting from the mothership, then everyone here has overts, motivators, justification, and withholds. Can we agree on that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And it's in the Bible, it says, blessed is a man whose sins God doth hide. So Allah covers, he covers, and some he has thrown into the sea of forgetfulness, correct?
Yes. Yes.
So there's certain things Allah has already forgiven us for and thrown it away, but what happens? We're still carrying that stuff around.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Make it sick.
And then what happens is with the overts, the motivators, the justification, and the withholds, what happens is there's overt accumulation. Again, that's not tech terminology. That's just the way I looked at it. And when the overts accumulate, they decrease our tone.
They do.
Okay. But when we don't take responsibility, atonement, overts accumulate and distill back in the form of fear, guilt, and sickness. So remember, if we draw the water up in a fine mist that the naked eye can hardly detect, But as it gathers in different layers of current of atmosphere, then when it becomes heavy, the gravitation, it distills back in the form of drops of water, drops of ice, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, this represents a formula. So this can be applied to anything in life. So here we're using the accumulation of overts. So overts accumulate, and then when the overts become heavy, the overts will distill back in the form of fear, guilt, and sickness. Because what is psychosomatic illnesses? Psychosomatic illnesses is really an accumulation of charge. It's the accumulation of things that we have done or has been done to us, and the thought gets converted into emotion, which is chemistry, which is hormones. Thought and the emotion accumulates into effort, which effort being mess body psychosomatic illnesses. So really, psychosomatic illnesses is a physical manifestation of an imbalance in our thought. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Sister Patricia.
You got decay, withhold. Explain it, please.
I just use the cycle of action to show the cycle of how the overts operate. The connection that I saw within the overt motivated as a cycle of action. Okay, that's just a cycle of action.
Okay.
See, everything I study now, I don't look at it as studying it as one element. I say to myself, okay, I understand this element. Where does it fit in a cycle of something? And then what I've noticed that when I study in that way, when I study things as part of a cycle, and I understand how to get from one part, I know the elements, I know the flow. I've removed all the ridges in the concept. When I take tests, my scores go up.
Oh, okay.
Because I'm studying from the perspective of a cycle of how things happen.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, here we go. We're at the end of it now. So overt cleansing, ablution. So we know what ablution is, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So we're going to do something that could be seen as processing. I pray, Sister Belinda, you can close us out with processing, because I think it might be necessary after this. We can process out after this point. Okay.
Yes, sir.
And I think we'll understand once we get to it. So can ablution, which is preparation for prayer, be a type of processing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Can atonement, and it's supposed to be a type of processing?
Absolutely.
And we want to examine the following actions and thoughts with respect to overts, motivators, justification, and withholds. We're going to go through a quick exercise, and then you can go through this process on your own time. And I think you might be able to use it to get case gain. Okay. So that Allah is the auditor, correct?
Yes. Right.
So when we do ablution, now if you read pages 144 to 145 of Message to the Black Man, these are things that the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches. You know, we start by cleansing the hands, then we cleanse the mouth, we cleanse the cleansing of the nostrils, the cleansing of the face and eyes, cleansing of the ears, cleansing of the head, cleansing of the arms, and the cleansing of the feet, correct?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
So what we're doing is we're cleaning all these things as part of a ritual, so that we want to no longer speak that which is unrighteous. We want to use our hands to work unrighteousness. We don't want to take in anything that's offensive to the nose. It's all of us have done this before. You're walking in the mall and you're walking past that store, and they might be frying up that bacon or whatnot. And all of a sudden we got to stop and look at the watch, a tire, shoe, and we want to get that little smell. We want to act like we're looking around. Man, I haven't smelled it in a long time, we cleanse our face and eyes because we don't even want to turn our face and eyes towards unrighteousness. We don't want to listen to unrighteousness. We don't want to think about unrighteousness. Our arms represent that which support us. We don't want to be supported by unrighteousness, and we don't want to use our feet to walk towards unrighteousness, correct?
Amen.
Okay, so that is the way it's described in Message to the Black Man, pages 144 to 145. Let's look at this as a type of processing. Because if we look at, again, these aren't Dianetic terms, this is just the way I was looking at it, atonement or overt processing, you know, think about the overts we have committed with our hands. And think about what motivated us to commit those overts and what did we use as a justification. Y'all with me?
Yes.
Okay. And then what are the withholds of that which we have done with our hands? Okay, now all you gotta do is just go down the list. What have we said that could be considered an overt? And what was the motivator that caused us to say what we said, and what did we use as a justification to say what we said? And then what was was there a withhold that was a result of what we said? Go ahead, Sister Shayla.
Brother Luke, my
We can't hear you, Sister Shayla.
go over this again.
Yeah.
This is so important that we understand this.
Okay.
Oh, I wanted to request following class that if you can please go over this again, because you're rushing through this, but this is so important. It is so important.
Okay, we'll go through this again. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this and go into a little more detail, because again, this is something that just popped up as I was doing the PowerPoint. But this is something that we could take this to a whole nother level and really spend a whole hour just on this.
Yes.
So this will just be a brief overview, and then God willing, next time maybe we'll go a little deeper into this. Okay, but this is something we can do on our own. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So just read pages 144, 145, Message to the Black Man, and then go through each part of the ablution, and then look at it from the perspective of overts, withholds, justifications, and motivators. And then we can start doing what we could call atonement. Look at each one of these almost like a dynamic and apply atonement to each one of these areas. Okay. There's not really too much as far as scent outside of, cheating on, walking past the barbecue and getting re-stimulated on the pulled pork and whatnot. I can't think of anything else, but now have we turned our face or eyes towards something that can be considered an overt?
Yes.
What was our motivation, and what did we use to justify it? And do we have a withhold? So withhold just means we did something that no one knows about. Okay.
I was watching TikTok.
Oh boy. Now with listening, do we have any overts with regards to listening? Okay. What was the motive for us to listening? Was it slander? Was it gossip? Was it something that we shouldn't have been listening to? Was it just we're in a certain environment and we had no choice? What was the justification? What is the withhold? Okay, what are we thinking about? Because remember, the coming of Jesus says we want to have the law in us so that we don't even think about it. As soon as you have thought about sin, that we have committed it, correct?
Correct. Right.
Okay, so really when we're dealing with overts, withholds, justifications, and motivators, we are going up into the mind. And if we can remove these things on that level, then I would think that that's a part of clearing, wouldn't it be? Wouldn't it be like a type of clearing?
Yes. Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so what was our motive for thinking about what we were thinking about, and what did we use to justify the thought? Then we can identify the withhold. It's like almost like an equation. What are things that we have done? What was the motive? How did we justify it? And what is the withhold? Where have we gone? Because in order to do the other ones, we had to go someplace probably. Where did we go? Why did we do it? How was it justified? Does all that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Perfect sense.
So we're looking at ablution as a type of, this is just a thought that came to mind, ablution as a type of overt processing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Removing overts, removing compulsion. Now, here's the solution, and there's only like two frames left. Surely as often as we sin, and I've added commit overts and withholds in brackets, we turn to him in prayer. He is most merciful and grants us pardon. Oftentimes we drift back again to some other flaw. For this, we must turn to him again, asking to be forgiven. Surely Allah knows what is in our hearts, and what is more, he is oft forgiving. This is message to the black man. I messed it up again, rushing to get this done. Page 136. Then he says on page 143, the 5 stated prayers erase the sins which have been committed during the intervals between them, if they had not been mortal sins. So is it possible that we can remove our overts if we just keep a guard on our prayers?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes,
It sounds like a sin is the same as an overt, correct?
it
Mhm.
is
And erasing the sins would be removing the overts, correct?
correct.
Okay. So then prayer is a type of processing. Our 5 daily prayers could be seen as a form of processing where we, the sinner, the aberrated individual, stand before Allah, who is also called Al-Sameh, the all-hearing. And the Arabic word for Sameh means hearing or auditory, which could also mean that Allah is the auditor, correct?
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
I like that.
So quick summary, there's no compulsion in religion. Well, why not? Compulsion leads to ARC breaks and invalidation. So there's no compulsion because then our religion becomes the source of our aberration. And that's not why Allah came in the person of Master Prophet Muhammad to invalidate us. He came to free us, correct?
Yes. Yes.
So we have to be processed back into willingness.
Mm-hmm.
If we live in accordance to the restrictive law, that's going to remove the overts. And if we remove the overts, then the removal of the overts, wouldn't that remove the motivators?
Yes.
Wouldn't that remove the justification?
Yes.
So then we wouldn't have any withholds, would we?
No, sir.
Okay, so the key is if you want to, so the overt would be like a basic on that chain, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Remove the overts and everything else vanishes.
Yes.
So when we take responsibility, we're actually removing the motivators.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So now I want to end with the quick video. It's like a little 1-minute video. And for those that came in late, I just want to show this clip of the minister. We'll handle last questions and then we're going to close it out. But let me go to the minister's video real quick. There you are. Okay. Let me why can't I? Okay. Can everyone see the minister?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Change when the sun goes down. Check yourself. As the sun begins to descend in the western sky, see, the energy from the sun is being taken from you and you start getting somewhat drowsy. So Eve here means that when God walks away, he takes the light with him, but he left light in you. But when your evening comes, meaning the light is diminishing, the strength of truth is diminishing in your mind, then another thought comes up in your mind against the light. And because it's evening, or it is eve, or the time of the weakening of truth in your own being, you hear to the other voice. So in the Quran, it says, I seek refuge in the Lord of men, the King of men, the God of men, from the evil whispering of a slinking devil that whispers into the hearts of men from among the jinn and the men. So most of your and my mess don't come from somebody outside ourselves. And even if it does, the person outside of you makes a suggestion to you. And even if you know it is wrong, somehow if you want to do it, you start playing with your mind to justify what you're about to do.
Mm, 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 mm.
Mm. Okay. Any closing remarks, comments, thoughts before we end it for the evening?
Just FYI, I did post the information in the chat about the movie, about the ayats as well.
Yes, I see that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I definitely know I gotta find that one.
Inshallah.
Okay. Sister Patricia.
Yes, sir. You know, what he said about when the light is with us and darkness come, then it leaves. Then we have to ask ourselves, do we really understand? Are we sincere, with what we have been given? Because if that light is upon us and it eliminating to us, that means it's gonna be there. But if you're, like you said, you got this force like a barrier, a blockage, or this defense shield, then you're not receiving anything well. And when it was said earlier, when they were mentioning of the brothers and sisters who has gone, well, not totally gone, they're not among us. But if you study them, Mother Tynetta, Dr. Minister Ava, and the list go on, and you were around them at any time and you listen to their words, the light hasn't left. It's still within you. So, but it's how you receiving it. Because if you receive it from the heart, it stays there. If you receive it from the mind, like it's an entertainment or a TV show, no, it's not going to be there. So the minister, I'm glad you pulled that video, because right now at this time, we all have to ask ourselves, that question, have you heard what I've said? Have you been listening? Have you received what was given to us? And if we've been receiving and we accepted it and we digest it well, then the light's going to be there. How you know when the light's going to be there? Your response, the language we use, is giving us our picture, the vision of what we have been taught, what we have been paying attention to, what we have studied. The sister was saying about earlier in a meeting. First of all, I observed. I'm a person that sits still and listen. I just observe very well. I think Allah has given me that tool to observe, and listen from the back ear. You can be up in the front, but you can still listen from the up in the front when there's conversation going on in the back. And it's not being nosy, it's just being alert. And so when you hear things, individuals can recite certain words or certain, they put it as a cliche, whatever, but it's not. You have to reference. We're in that point now. I didn't used to do that, but I'm doing it now. I'm trying to do it now. When I'm referencing, if I'm saying something, I want to take it to where I got it from, because that's so important. Because then that person can research what I said or go back and maybe they reread it and say, oh no, I didn't get that. I got it like this, and that's a thank you as a help, not to condemn me, but to help, because everybody here different. Some people skip words because they could be doing something else. They could be writing or they could be talking to somebody in the background and they may miss one or two words. So the light is going to be in us if we go back or continue, digesting and living that life and using it. Even the study guides, go back over them. Even Dianetics, go back over them. And then you can, the light won't leave. It won't leave if you're digesting it very well. I thank you for that video, because it's very important to all of us at this time, we can't stay in the dark. We will be destroyed.
Yes,
If
ma'am.
we stay in the dark, we will be destroyed. So thank you for sharing that.
Yes, ma'am. You're very welcome. Anyone else? Before we wrap it up?
Go ahead. Assalamu alaikum.
All right, Sister Melinda, if you would give us the processing, and then we will close out.
Yes, sir. Family, let's prepare for the end of session. Rapid sketch over the session just ended. Begin. Sketch for what you have been doing again with particular attention to how you have been sitting. Begin. Go over the period of the session with regard only to what you have been doing with your hands and things in the exterior world you have heard during this session. Begin. Fix your attention upon a pleasant object near you now. Begin. Okay, family, that concludes the end of session processing, and I'll turn it back over to Brother Lukman.
Thank you, Sister Belinda.
You're welcome.
And let us go ahead and I'll send out the email. We'll go ahead and close out. Attention prayer. I seek refuge in Allah from the accursed Satan. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent and Merciful. All praise is due to Allah, Lord of the worlds, the Beneficent, the Most Merciful, Master of the Day of Judgment in which we now live. Thee alone do we serve, thine aid do we seek. Please, Allah, guide us on the straight path, the path upon whom thou hast bestowed favors, not the path upon whom thy wrath is brought down, nor of those who go astray if they have heard thy teachings. Ameen.
Amen.
Ameen.
Assalamu alaikum,
I
family.
mean,
Walaikum salam.
walaikum salam.
Salam.
Wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Shukran.
Alhamdulillah.
Assalamu alaikum, family.
Walaikum salam.
Walaikum salam, Sister Peggy.